Hey, can I ask you a question?
What are you doing in my room?
I just need to ask you a question.
What?
Can you give me and my friends a ride to school? It's cold and I don't want to ride my bike. What?
Are you really asking that?
Yeah, I don't think it's a big deal. Just give me a ride and some of my friends to school.
You need to understand something. Just because you and your loser friends are in high school now doesn't mean I'm going to give you a ride, okay? Because look at me. You need to understand that when people look at you, they see a freak, all right? And if they know that I'm related to you, if they know we're brothers, they're going to think I'm a freak too, okay? And I'm not okay with that. So here's the deal. I don't care how you get there. I don't care if you have to walk or crawl or whatever, but I'm not going to be a chauffeur for you and your loser friends, okay?
It's not my fault that Dad left. Why do you keep taking out on me?
Whatever.
No, you know I'm right.
Okay. I'm sorry.
You're not sorry. You're only sorry that I'm calling you out. I'll just ride my bike.
I said I was sorry.
I'll ride my bike.
Come on. And in the process of trying to dump our baggage on someone else, inevitably what happens is we pick up more baggage. And then there's that one. My sin. My secret sin. It's cool. I mean, I've got it under control. Who am I kidding? Most of the time it has control of me. And this is the way I live. And yet, I hear the words of Christ who says, I've come that you may have life and may have it abundantly. I don't know about you, but this doesn't really feel like abundant life to me. I can't walk straight. I can barely keep my balance. And then I remember his words. Because Christ also said, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. That's what I want. That's what I want. So I go to God. God, please, if you're willing, would you take this baggage from me? Because God, I'm miserable and I can't live this way anymore. Please take it. And you know what? He takes it.
Good morning. Glad you're here today. As we already heard, we've got a group out this morning. They're in Vacaville, and I'm extremely excited about this because we have a mission team now that's beginning to catch a vision that we need to be more than just who we are here. We need to look outside of these walls and find ways to do things, to reach people, to be a part of ministries that will help grow the kingdom. And so we've got about 10 folks or so with parents who are in Vacaville. There's a church called F3. Bring the house lights up just a little bit. There's a new church plant called F3 that our association is a part of, and we're there helping with our music team to help them understand more about worship. So pray for them. They've been there this morning. I think their service started at 10. So we want to lift them up. For the guests that are with us today, if you're visiting for your first time, we're really glad you're here. There's a blue card in the pew in front of you if you want to. Take a minute, fill that out, and drop that in the offering plate as it comes around at the end of the service. We're not asking you to contribute to the work of the service. That's up to you, but we would love to just say thanks for coming. That'll be at the end of the service. So what will happen if you're a guest today is I'm going to give a teaching, 35, 40 minutes. We're going to have a time of reflection. And at the time of reflection, if you're working with the Upward Sports, the time of reflection, even if you're up in the balcony, I would love to have everybody come down during the time of reflection that's working with Upward Sports that's going to kick off officially this Saturday. And I want to have a prayer time for all of you during our reflection time. So be ready at the end of the service for us to do that. So we'll have some teaching. We'll have a little prayer time, offertory, and then go enjoy a meal, be reflecting on what God's saying to you today. But we're talking about self. We're in a sermon series. This is the fourth part of a 4-week sermon series, and we've been examining finality, like death and things that we have to deal with in life. We've been looking at change, how change kind of messes up life and brings challenges that we don't want to face at times. We've been looking at things that happen that make us fail or that are reasons for why we fail, and trying to ask, why are we failing? And to decide, are we a failure or are we just someone who fails? And then today we're going to be looking at the self. So what we're doing, this sermon series is called Facing Life's Hurts. In this series, we're identifying one of those challenges. We're looking at Peter and his life to see how he dealt with these challenges that came up in his life. And then we're looking at this word called sanctification. And that word sanctification, it's not a word that we use every day. It's a really great biblical word, but it's not a word that we've taken from like Bible usage into everyday life. And so we use this illustration that a horse was made to run, a knife was made to cut, a car was made to drive. In the same way, we were made with a purpose. Now, if a knife is used to unscrew a screw in the wall or something like that, yeah, you can do that. You may break the tip off that knife and ruin it. So in the process of using a knife in an improper way, it's not being sanctified. That's the biblical word again. It's not a word that we would use in our everyday language. But in understanding that, then we have to ask ourselves, are we being used the way God created us? Are we the people that God wants to use in this hurting world to bring peace and joy and a good word? If so, then our life will be shaped and patterned after a certain lifestyle. That's called sanctification. So we will explore that term, sanctification, and then basically we're going to look for better ways to do it. So today we're looking at facing self. So if in a way you were to just kind of hold your hand up in front of you and imagine that was a mirror, and if you were looking into the mirror and seeing the reflection of your face, would you be satisfied with what you see? Are you happy with who you are? Do you feel like things are going the way God intends them to go into your life, or the way you feel they need to go? I mean, we all have ups and downs in lives. There's no doubt about that. At times we're up, at times we're down, and just like we sang that song, there's nothing that will keep us from His love. No matter where we're up or down, that's where God wants us to move toward in our life. But thinking about ourselves, sometimes we get in the way of doing what God wants us to do. I don't know, I'd ask this question. I don't want to embarrass anybody, but how many of you, not counting those who are teenagers, but how many of you would kind of long for the days to go back when you were teenagers once again? Anybody here like to be a teenager again? All right, some various results there. I'm convinced that the teenage years are a very particular year, or frame of years, or time of year, that identify a time in our lives when we are moving from childhood into adulthood, and what we're doing is we're trying to grab a hold of something that has meaning that we can say is ours. And I believe that Adam and Eve, most likely in my interpretation, sinned or turned or were rebellious against God during their teenage years. If you think about it, teenage years are a time in life where we say, this is what I want to do. I've learned how to do it. My parents don't know anything about anything. I know everything about everything. We've left childhood when we would cling to mom and dad, when we would cling to their truth and listen to what they would say. And we've moved into this period of life when we want to do it our way, the way our own self wants to determine it. And fortunately, most of us move through those teenage years. And we realize responsibility, we realize adulthood, we realize those things that we need to do. And it's the same spiritually speaking, if you think about it. We're brought into God's family as children. And at that point, then, we have a choice. God does not force or make us or twist our arm to grow. God allows life's hurts to challenge us and give us opportunities to grow. But God doesn't say, you have to stop being a child and be an adult in Christ. God says, here's your life. This is where I want you to be. This is where you are. And you will have to go through these hurts, through these challenges, through these experiences until you realize that I know what's best for you. And so many Christians are caught in that period where they want to be rebellious. They want to have their own way. They want to do things the way they think is right for them. They want to do for the self what they think the self wants. But how many of you know oh so well that feeling of moving beyond those years, falling in love all over again with mom or dad or that authority figure that's in your life, and saying, they know what's best for me now. They love me now just like they loved me then, but I just didn't get it then. I wanted to be me, and I didn't understand that. You know, if you were to ask yourself, just yourself in general, why you came here this morning, what would your answer be? Just think for a moment, why did you take yourself and bring self into this room this morning? Some of you are here regularly. Some are guests today. We're glad that you're here. Some are kind of exploring. Do I want to be here? Do I want to be out on the golf course? What is it that I really want to do? And there's some here that are conflicted between this. I'd really rather be somewhere else, but I know I need to be here. I'm not sure why or what's going on, but God's brought me here. And you've got this conversation going on with yourself. And it's almost like there's a confliction between a part of you that wants to be here and knows you need to draw closer to God, and a part of you that says, I really don't want that. I want to do what I want to do. Can I get a witness? Does anybody identify with that? That there's this tension still within many people. Did you know in our country, it's a country that claims to be about 75% Christian. Did you know if you were to take the percentage of people who came regularly to a worship service, and by regularly they say at least once to twice a month. Now that's not real hard. That's like 12 to 20 times a year doing something, coming to a place. People go to movies oftentimes in a year, more than that. What percentage do you think of Americans come to a place of worship regularly? Just throw out some numbers, I'm just curious. How many of you would think 50%? Raise your hand. No? Less. Denise, how many would you say? 22%. Anybody else? 10%. We're getting closer. It's right in that 13 to 18%. Right around 15% people who say they're believers, who want to walk the walk, who want God to be a meaningful moment, not just in one part of their day, but throughout their day, throughout their week, throughout their month. They want that. They know they need that. They know they're created that way. But they're dealing with that tension. You know, it's like I haven't called my dad in 2 weeks and I'm starting to feel guilty. Usually we talk at least once a week or more. I know he's got some stuff going on in his life. I'm going to go visit him in April. I've decided for sure he's in Georgia. We're going to go and get together at least 4 times a year. He's 85 and we need to spend time together. I know that. But I'm starting to feel a little guilty. So today I'm sure I'll give him a call and say, Dad, I missed you. How you doing? But what is your greatest need? And what is God's greatest desire for you? That's what we're talking about in this series. So as we're facing self, we're going to ask a question. Are you happy with yourself? Is there something you need? Are you self-satisfied, self-contained? Or like the video, do you have baggage that you've been picking up and carrying? Baggage from way back. Maybe as a baby you were rocked with big rocks. Maybe your uncle took intimate interest in you. Maybe your third grade teacher didn't like you. Perhaps you were called names, or your best friend stole your girlfriend, or your dad called you Butterfingers in public, or you had a big head, floppy ears, fat feet, or a long nose. Let me ask you a question. If your best friend or your mom or your dad or brother, sister was a plastic surgeon and you could have anything done anytime for nothing to change your appearance, where would you start? What is it about yourself that you don't like when you look in the mirror? Maybe you'd have a little bit cut off the nose, or maybe the ears trimmed back a little bit more. Maybe the eyes lifted or the chin pulled in to get rid of that turkey gobbler. Maybe you'd have a little bit pulled in here, lifted up here, pulled up here, dropped down here, built up here. What would you do? And in the end, do you know what you would end up being? Your plastic surgeon would make you into a plastic person. Now, how many of you want to worship a plastic Jesus? How many of you want to worship and put your faith and trust into something that's falsely built up? Something that's not real, something that's been exaggerated, made over, made up. I think most of you would say, I want something real in my life. I want to be able to connect with reality where I don't have to carry all that baggage. That's what this 4-part video has been all about. It's been about picking up baggage that you think others expect you to pick up. And you start picking it up. Dad says this about you. Mom says this. Someone in school says that. You're called a name. All of a sudden, you start picking up baggage. And you start saying, this is who I am. And God says, that's not how you should see yourself. That's not who you are. That's not who I've made you. Now, understand, there's two huge choices that individuals have to make in life. One choice is to make that choice to be a Christ follower and to say, I've heard this gospel, I've read the Bible, I've heard the stories. There's no reason I can't decide for myself, I want to be a Christ follower. You make that decision, you walk the aisle, you pray a prayer, you're in your home or in your bed and you're crying and weeping, wondering why you do stupid stuff, and you say, God, I want to give my life to you, and you do that. And that starts it. That's a wonderful thing. I'm happy that you've experienced that. But then the choice is daily and weekly and monthly to grow in Christ, not to remain a baby, and not even to get caught into those teenage years, because most of you will recognize when you first became a Christian and you began to grow in the Word and you begin to hear certain things about the Bible and about Christ, other people would come and challenge you, and they would say things that would maybe test your faith, and you go, well, I'm not sure. Well, maybe you're right, and maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I'm not sure I really believe in God. And you go through those teenage years where you start doubting God and wondering if everything you've heard in the Bible is really true. By now, you're exploring in the world, you're sowing your wild oats, you're testing things to see if they're true, and oftentimes we get caught there for years, sometimes for a lifetime. And we decide that we don't want to grow, we want to just stay right where we are. It's safe. It's a place that we like. And God lets us. He lets the world's hurts come upon us. He lets all those things in life that happens to us happen. And He's waiting and loving us. And the Holy Spirit continues to say, move on towards God. Take the next steps towards Him. That's called sanctification. Now, there are others who have never made that choice. They've come to church a couple of times. They've checked it out. They've heard about sacrifice. They've heard about giving up their own choices, their own life desires, and putting their life in Jesus' hands. And they said, oh, I'm not sure. I want to keep my life in my hands. I want to be the master of my own ship. I want to be the captain of my own vessel. I want to determine my own fate, my own destiny, my own future. I'm not sure I want to give it to a God I can't see, a God I can't really talk to in dialogue, and a Jesus that's been dead for years, and they say He lives again. There are people who just won't make that choice. It's a mystery. I don't know why. I keep praying for them. I keep asking that God would reveal something to them, and maybe perhaps one or two of you are here today. You've come out of courtesy, or you've come out of search, or you've come to give it another try. And you're saying, this time, God, will you take away that problem? Will you solve this issue? Will you help me through this event? Will you prove yourself to me? And God's saying, I've already proved myself. So if you're here today and you've never made that step of faith, I would invite you to do that at some time. You can do it this morning by just bowing your head now and saying, God, I'm not sure why I'm not willing to take that step, but I want to take it this morning. Let me hear what this guy's got to say, because I want things to be different. You can do it when you go home. You can do it at the end of the service. You can do it as long as you have breath and the Spirit calls. But I believe, unfortunately, there is a time where God, His Spirit just leaves you. It's kind of like Pharaoh because of the hardened heart. And I'd pray that would not happen to any of you. But I want you to hear one thing, and if you can take this with you this morning, if you take nothing else with you, I think that would probably be enough. And that's this thought, that oftentimes we are our problem's problem. Could you agree with me on that? Oftentimes we are our problem's problem. Heard a story, and this is one of my favorite preacher jokes, about a guy that is laying in bed and his wife's gotten up and she's getting ready for church as she does faithfully every week, and he's still lying in bed. Occasionally, he'll just lay in bed, but usually he gets up to go. But this time he's just laying in bed and he won't get out of bed. And she says, honey, you need to get up and go. We're going to be late. He goes, I don't want to go down to that church anymore. Those people are mean. They always say bad stuff to you. I go there. I don't feel like anybody likes you. It's like nobody likes me. I don't want to be there this morning. And she goes, well, honey, you've got to. You're the pastor. Now, some of you have heard that. Sometimes we're our own problem, and that pastor has got to get it through his mind that it's not about his self-worth. Gosh, if my self-worth was found on Sunday morning from 10:30 to 11:30, I'd be a basket case. I would be. Some Sundays I feel like I did well. Some Sundays I feel like I embarrassed myself. I'm up and down. It's like crazy time from 10:45, 11 o'clock until 11:45-ish. If I had my self-worth based on what I'm doing right now, I'd be in the crazy house. We have to have our self-worth based on something more than who we are. Because I guarantee we will always let ourselves down. So we're looking at this example. We're looking at the life of Peter. We've looked at three other stories of Peter's life that have kind of crisscrossed in this message series. Today we're going to be looking at Peter. And in some ways, Peter could be called his own worst enemy. You've known people like that. It's just like they keep doing the same thing the same way. They can't get it through their thick skulls. Peter was exactly like that. I want to share two examples with you, and I'm going to kind of narrate these examples. But they're found in John, so if you'd like to look, John chapter 13, 18, and 21. Most of you know the story. Some of you haven't been to church maybe in a while, but I guarantee most everyone who's come to church 10 or 15 times out of their life have heard of this guy by the name of Peter. It's Simon Peter. Simon was his name before Christ. Peter was his name after he came to know Christ. And he was a hard-headed, rough-talking, calloused hand, blue-collar of the blue-collar workers of the day. He was a fisherman. And everything you've heard about the Navy most likely is true, but go back 2,000 years, and here's this rough and tough, tumbled fisherman eking out his salary and his lifestyle on a boat in a lake catching fish. And Jesus says, leave your nets, leave your boats, leave your future, and come follow me, a stranger, and I will make you a fisher of men. Somehow the Holy Spirit spoke to Peter, and he left, and he went to follow Jesus. Now, during that 3-year period that Peter's hanging out with Jesus and the other disciples, the other apostles, there are up to 70 of the disciples at the time, but really there are those 12 that we hear about. And Peter's one of them. And Peter's like Jesus' bodyguard, his right-hand man. John, on the other hand, who wrote this gospel that talks about this story of Peter, John is like the laid-back guy that just wants to be with Jesus, just wants to kick back and be loved on by Jesus and spend time with Jesus. Two completely different personalities. So here's Peter. Jesus is getting ready to leave. In chapter 14, you remember the story. Jesus is saying, I'm getting ready to go. You can't go with me. I'm going to prepare a place for you to go. But just before that, as he's getting ready to prep them about his leaving, he's talking about going to Jerusalem. And they say, Jesus, you just can't go to Jerusalem. You're going to get killed. It's not going to be good. And Jesus says, I've got to go. And Peter says, well, Lord, anywhere you go, I'll go with you. I'll protect you. I'm your bodyguard, your right-hand man. Nothing's going to happen to you. I will watch after you. Here's this kind of a cocky kind of guy, the cock crowed. And so he's this kind of guy that thinks he can do anything, anytime. And Jesus says, Peter, not only will you not be able to save me from going to the cross and dying, but you're going to deny me 3 times. And Peter says, hey, Lord, there's no way. There's no way this is going to happen. Now, Peter is with Jesus and John, and they're in Gethsemane, and they're outside praying, and Jesus is inside praying. Jesus comes out of Gethsemane, and the soldiers come up to arrest him. And there's a slave, one of the guys that came to arrest Jesus. Of course, Judas was there. He was the one that kissed Jesus, which was the sign that was the Jesus they were going to arrest. And you remember what Peter did? He took a sword, and he cut the ear off of that slave guy because he thought he was the man. He was doing what he had to do to protect Jesus. What did Jesus do? He picked up that ear. That's kind of gross, isn't it? Picked up that ear, put it back on that slave guy, and then Jesus is taken off to where he's being questioned for the night. He's being brought before a couple of different people, and Peter's following him. You can almost imagine Peter following him in his footsteps, kind of in the shadow of Jesus and the soldiers. And they take Jesus into a room where they're questioning him, and the biblical story is kind of like that. Outside of the gate was open, and Peter was at a campfire with some other people there. And the biblical text implies that Jesus was inside the building beyond the gate, but yet the gate was open and the door of the house was open, and inside Jesus was being beat. He was being spat upon. He was being cursed. The crown of thorns and stuff and all that beating on his back and all that was happening. And it says that Peter was at the campfire and he could see Jesus. Now get that picture in your mind for a moment. And here's Peter in his flesh, in his self, because that's what it is. It's a battle between the flesh or the self and the Spirit of God, who He wants us to be. That's why you do what you don't want to do. That's why you think what you don't want to think. That's why you go where you don't want to go. Right? It's that battle that we have that Paul talks about in Romans. Why do I do what I don't want to do? Why can't I do what I want to do? It's this body of death that I'm chained to. So Peter in his self looks and sees Jesus. And that little girl, says, hey, you're a Nazarene. Hey, you were with him. Peter says no, and 3 times. And the 3rd time he says it, the cock crows. And just imagine the way Peter felt at this moment. He just melted in agony, melted in tears, melted in pain. He had cursed that he didn't know this guy, Jesus. Keep that in mind for just a moment. How he felt in his self. And now Jesus goes to the cross. He's hung on the cross and he's crucified. 3 days later on a Sunday morning, he rises up out of the grave and 500 people at one time see him. He appears to the disciples, to the apostles, and for 40 days he's with them. But just a couple of weeks after the crucifixion, like the next week after he first appeared to them, Peter, you know where he is? He went back fishing. Think about that for a moment. Jesus called him from the boats, and he left. Jesus died. Peter didn't know what to do. He went back to where he was comfortable. Back where his self was comfortable. That's why people who are alcoholics, they're more comfortable going back into alcoholism. That's why people who are addicted to pornography are more comfortable going back into pornography. That's why people who are addicted to drugs or addicted to adultery or addicted to sexual promiscuity or addicted to gambling or addicted to eating, we always want to go back where we're comfortable. That's the default in the self. Now you know why you get up at night and eat ice cream, don't you? It's the default. Peter went back to his boats. He's out in the water. The others had gone with him. And someone said, "Hey, John." John says, "Hey, that's Jesus on the beach." That was a lake. They weren't far away. They didn't have binoculars. And here's Peter. Now get this picture. Here's Peter. He's excited. They were naked. You know, they fished when they were naked. They didn't have washing machines back then, and it was, you know, like yucky water, and some of it was salty, and it was just, yeah, they fished. They usually were naked. And so he throws on some clothes. He jumps into the water. He swims to the beach, and there's Jesus. And Peter is so excited to see Jesus. Well, they camp out. They have some food, and Jesus teaches them some things. And then Jesus pulls Peter off to the side. He says, "Peter, let's talk for a few minutes." Now remember, Peter denied Jesus 3 times. 3 times Jesus says, "Peter, do you love me? Peter, do you love me? Peter, do you love me?" Twice he uses the term phileo love, which is brotherly love, which is important. And then he uses agape love, which is that God-given love that we have as believers. And that's what we're going to get into. We're going to see that. So Peter now, when he writes 2 Peter, it's at the end of his life. He's just getting ready to be crucified himself. He stuck with it. He learned the lesson. He knew how to be stable. Something changed. Jesus made a difference in his life. Like in many of yours, he made a difference. And so we see in 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 9, he's talking to these believers in the church. He says, "Listen, this is a message that I learned, and you need to learn too, that the Lord is not slow. He will fulfill his promises. But listen, he doesn't see slowness or time in the same way you see it." What Peter is saying to you, he said to them. Hang in there. If you want God to have his way over your way, he will take your way and make it his way. Give him time. You've got to grow in the faith. And then we see this period of growth called sanctification. Let's go to the slide that says Peter learned how to get out of God's way, because this has been our theme verse. I hope by now you've got most of it. It's a story of growth. It's a story of being sanctified. Remember, that word sanctified purely means being used for God's purpose. Yes, it may be a big Greek, kind of a biblical word that we don't use regularly, but it's a great word. A guy by the name of Rick Warren's made a bunch of popular people and a bunch of books and a bunch of money off of that word, purpose. But even Rick will admit he did not get it out of the sky. It came from the Word of God. We are created for God's purpose. So if you're a knife and you're not cutting, you may get broken because someone's using you to try to pull a nail out of a piece of wood. If you're a horse and if you're locked up in a stable and no one will let you out and let you run, you're probably going to be miserable. And if you're a classic car and you're parked in a garage and nobody gets to see how beautiful you are or gets to drive you, you're probably, I guess cars don't think a whole lot about being anything, but you get my point. So Simon opens up this book and he says, grace and peace be to you. His divine power is granted to you. His godliness is given to you. And he says now on verse 5, for this very reason. And now he begins to show the steps of the stepladder of growth. For this very reason, make every effort to supplement your faith with virtue. Faith is the foundation of coming to Christ. Virtue is goodness, it's excellence, it's being set apart for excellence. And then he says, next comes knowledge. Knowledge is in the growth of the Word. How many of you read the Bible regularly? Probably not many Christians or believers read the Bible regularly. But yet that's where knowledge comes from. Knowledge from God's Word. Knowledge then will lead us to self-control. And it's self-control that helps us to say no to the self, right? That's self-control. The self wants to have its way, but God's Spirit wants you to have His way, and so we have to have the self under control. And self-control comes with steadfastness, comes with stability. It comes with sticking to the task. And then we see from steadfastness comes godliness. We looked at this last week. It does not mean I'm like God. It does not mean that I've reached the level of sinless perfection. It simply means that you can see God in me. That I begin to be more like God, I become less like the old Bill. As I become to grow in Jesus, the old begins to fade away. All things become new. But then we're going to look at these two words for this morning briefly, and that is that the godliness leads to brotherly affection, and the brotherly affection leads to love. Now remember, if you're lacking these qualities, it's because you've forgotten what God's done in you. You're blind, you're short-sighted, you've forgotten the cleansing of your sins. So let's look at this for just a moment. Then sanctification is a necessary choice for a believer to be a believer. Many people will refute this or say that's not true. I would disagree. If you don't see growth in your life in any way for a sustained period of time, if you don't see something changing in your life, if you don't see something different about you than before you were a Christian, I would say most likely you are not a Christian. I know some of you are saying, well, you're not judged, you don't know who's going to heaven. You're exactly right. But you know, if it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, and if it, looks like a duck, it's probably a duck. Thank you. If you put a kernel of corn in the ground and walk away from it and don't water it, nothing happens to it, and if it doesn't grow, is it a corn plant? No. Is it going to reap corn? No. Now that's the mystery that I don't understand, how some believers can remain dormant in a spiritual state, then all of a sudden something happens, a divorce or a tragedy or an incident, and they come back to God, they come back into church, and they begin to blossom. And then on the other hand, I see young people that come to know who God is, and it's like instant growth for like months and years. Sometimes it stops. Sometimes it keeps going. But we know there has to be movement, growth. There has to be some kind of outward sign of the inward work. And that's called sanctification. So it moves from faith to goodness to godliness to steadfastness to all of these things that eventually take us to two end things. One is brotherly love, and the other is agape love. And let me ask you to ask yourself a serious question. Do you have a hard problem loving some people? The answer is yes, right? It's got to be yes. Because if you don't have any problem loving anybody, then you've reached a higher state than anybody I know. We all struggle with what people do in our lives, just like in that video. Some of you have baggage you're holding on to. Some of you have things that you've been trying to get rid of. Some of you have issues that you're trying to unissue. Some of you have problems that you're trying to unproblem, but you just can't seem to do it, and you're carrying that baggage with you. And it's come to the point that every time you walk past a mirror, you really don't want to look at yourself because you're embarrassed, you're ashamed, you're disappointed. You think others are embarrassed in you, ashamed to know you, disappointed to be around you. The truth is that they may have the same kind of problem as you. They just fake it better. There are people here today who are hurting because people have hurt them. You're hurting because people have hurt you. They've said things to you. They've done things to you. They've taken you places that you didn't want to go, done things to you that you did not want to happen. And you're trying to find a way to live with that. There's this bitterness and there's this anger and there's this frustration deep inside of you, and it controls most of what you do. And so God can't control, because you can't have dual controls in one life. You can't serve God and mammon. You can't love God and love the world at the same time. You've got to let go and let one or the other have control. So many Christians are caught up into this. I'm hurt. The church hurt me. A church member hurt me. A pastor hurt me. A mom hurt me. A dad hurt me. I never want to go there again. I never want to see them again. I never want to be a part of their life again because they hurt me. Remember what I've said. Most often we are our own problem's problem. And most likely it's been on us. But we want to project it outward onto somebody else. That's why Jesus loved his enemies. That's why Jesus said to the Romans who crucified him, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. That's why Jesus had this unreasonable love for people. That's why Jesus could touch the leopards. He could love the adulteresses. He could actually care for the Pharisees and the Sadducees who had a heart to know him. It were the hypocrites that he had no time for. And he knew the difference. Jesus said to Peter, do you phileo me? That word love is a friend relational word. And Peter had to say, yes, Lord, you are my friend. Because you can't love as God loves until we friend as God friends. And that's where it's hard to do. It's hard to be a friend of someone who calls you names. It's hard to be a friend of someone who you don't think likes you. And at times, all you can do is say, you know, I love you. I would love to be your friend, but honestly, when I'm with you, I feel like you don't like me, and I don't understand that. Is there something that I'm doing that's upsetting you? You can make that effort to become friends. We need to leave the altar and to go make friends with our enemies. We need to try to be at one with all people at all times. Sometimes we can't. Honestly, sometimes we do all we can, and that's as far as we can go, and we have to move on. But I think most often when we have broken relationships, it's because we're not willing to let go first and to go to the one that we need to go to. And this happens so often in church, folks. People get upset. People get frustrated. People don't like this. They don't like that. They don't like what's happening. Someone hurts them. And usually it's for a good reason. We need to love them. And there are people in your life you need to love. I don't know if this is connecting with anybody. Maybe everyone's thinking, you know, I've got no enemies. Everything's great. Everyone loves me. I'm just the most lovable person around. There's nothing I could ever do that would upset anybody. How could anybody not like to be in my presence? But reality is that we need to learn agape love. And that means we have to get over the friendship issues and the personal issues put the self aside, and then let Jesus love through us. That's agape. Our reflection is going to be asking this question: how bad does your pain have to be before you'll do something about it? They say that change is hard. Most people don't like to change, and most people will only change when the pain is worse than the change. Is there pain in your life that you want to see changed? Is there something that you demand to be different? You need to be different. If it's not different, you won't exist. Your life will be miserable. You could go back and ask yourself what it is that will make the difference, what it is that will turn the tide, how love can be used in a way that will change someone's attitude and change your relationship. I ask you to bow your head and close your eyes. Just, you don't have to close your eyes if you don't want to. You don't have to bow your head, but just get reflective for a moment. Just close things out. Let's let the house lights come down and just get a moment where it's you and God and forget about me, although I'm still talking. But what's going on in your life? Where do you hurt? Where are others hurting around you? What's out of whack? What's broken? What needs to be fixed? What relationship needs to be mended? What do you need to do in your own life? What do you need to do right? What do you need to stop doing? What do you need to get better at? Why are you so lazy that you don't want to do it? Why is it the self doesn't want to do it? The self keeps wanting to wake up at 3 o'clock and eat ice cream. The self keeps wanting to turn on the computer and watch pornography. The self keeps wanting to feed itself. Why? And is there a better way? Yes, there is. That better way is called sanctification. It's growing in faith. It's walking down the road that God has prepared for you. It's giving up your will for His will, your life for His life, your desires for His desires. Sometimes it's really, really hard because the self doesn't want to do that. The self doesn't want to do that. If you're here today and you know that you've got to get something right in your life, maybe it's going to start with prayer. I'm going to have just a few minutes of prayer down front for those that want to come down. Then I'm going to be asking those serving with upper to come down as we pray for them. But right now I want to open up the aisles of the prayer time or the altar for you. It may be that, like Peter, you've got to acknowledge your selfishness and your independent spirit. You've got to give that up and come forward before others to acknowledge your evil or your sin. Father, I pray during this prayer time that you would move in people's hearts and lives, and that you might let us know that there is a better way to do life than what we've been doing it. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes giving up the things our flesh likes because the flesh gets immediate satisfaction from those things. But toiling and planting and watering the Spirit, it takes time. And I'd just as soon get a self-satisfied few minutes from a bowl of ice cream than to read your Word and to grow in faith. One lasts for a moment, one lasts for eternity. So, Father, move your Spirit through this place. In Jesus' name, the aisle's open if you'd like to come down and pray for a few minutes.